We are live. What's going on, everybody? I'm Adam, and this
I'm
is
something. Brick something.
Oh, it's been a while. It feels like it's been a while. I know it's been 4 weeks because that's kind of a regular. Actually, it hasn't been, has it? It's been longer than that because we didn't do live last time. We pre-recorded, so it's actually been like 5 weeks.
I don't think we pre-recorded
the Christmas one.
Oh, okay.
Didn't we? It was pre-recorded.
Okay.
But it's been a while. We haven't talked about the comic book in a while, like in a good long while, just because schedules haven't worked and we've both been very, very busy and so on and so forth. So, with issue 5 being done, as far as we know, I thought it'd be fun to just have a live chat to just sort of talk about, what we sort of anticipate we might see in issue 5, what we'd like to see going forward in the second arc, and just sort of chat a little bit about the comic book, and sort of where we're at with that. So let's just get right into it. We've seen issue 4. I mean, we've all, presumably, if you're watching this, you've probably read issue 4. Because we're going to be talking about the comic book. So if that interested you, then hopefully you're caught up. There will be spoilers if you haven't read up to issue 4.
Yes.
But full disclosure, neither Brick nor I has read issue 5. But we will probably get an advanced copy. So sucks to be you guys, but you could have started a channel and a video.
Let's be honest for a second. I remember, because we were talking right before this. I believe I think we've seen it. Remember the one without the bubbles? But there was no dialogue. Am I right in that?
Issue 5?
Yeah.
We've seen some of the art. Like, we've seen a couple of the pages out of context, out of order. Yes. And I think you and I were both like, I have no idea what to expect from this, because it's like it doesn't. Yeah. There's characters in frames that don't look like they should be in the same frame, so it's a bit odd, but yeah, we'll see. But before we get into that, let's quickly check in with the chat because it's already bumping. Star is hanging out. Red 5 is here. Thanos Copter. Rape has. Nolan is here. Hello, Nolan. How are you? Good to see you. I think that's everybody that's commented so far, but we will we'll get into the comments in a minute. Before we do, like I said, we've read issue 4, and it's sort of setting up for a big sort of climactic thing. We've got all the pieces in place. I think it's pretty fair to assume that we're going to have, some sort of head-to-head between Pale and Kali, or Chunari and Horrid, right up against it. What are your predictions for how the first story arc might finish?
Okay, so I think we're gonna find out that Darth Vader's actually Luke Skywalker's father. No, Classic. So yeah, actually, let's see. Where did we leave off? They have to. Okay, what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that we're gonna get a little bit more payoff as to some of the things that we learned about Kali. Kali in the early issues was freaking out. We kind of saw him moving in and out of this form, like he's changing. He's angry. At one point, again, spoiler alert, he shifts to a very human-looking form. And so, and we also kind of already know, based on the figure announcements and character announcements that are coming out, or I'm always careful. Do we know this? That there are different forms of Kali?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, we do, right? Okay, because we've seen Kali Prime.
We've seen Kali Prime. The Paint Master was at PowerCon, I think.
Thank you. Which is a big, giant, wild-looking Kali, bigger than gorilla size. So I'm predicting, based on all of those things, that we will see that character and we'll maybe learn a little bit more about the characters. Will learn more about their human roots. I'm hoping that Pale does, and I kind of want to know what that will do to his journey of coming to terms with who he is
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, we still don't have really any sort of concrete resolution as to, like, who was human and who was born an animal, and sort of how does that really work? Because with Kali, um, we see the clones, and the clones seem to start human and then kinda change as the consciousness sort of becomes part of the entity that we know as Kali. So yeah, I mean, you're right, and I didn't even think of that part. You know, the actual mechanics of how does this world work? Like, are they still human underneath, or are they? You know, is that DNA fused at this point? That would be very interesting. Um, the big thing, you know, I think for me, I want there to be a change in, like, I don't want there to be like, I don't want the second story arc to just be He-Man versus Skeletor for the rest of, you know, like, I want Kali to have sort of an end to this part of his story, or Pale, or somebody, right? Like, I want there to be sort of a line drawn in the sand where it's sort of like, okay, going forward, you know, now the new story arc starts, and it's gonna give us, like, I want a new big bad is kind of what I'm getting at. I want somebody to sort of step into the role of Kali.
To use the parlance of He-Man, you want Hordak to show up.
Sure, yeah, exactly. I want there to be like, oh, well, Kali is bad, but he's not as bad as some people, you know, thought. There's somebody worse, or there's something worse, or yeah, I think for me this story is you know, we're kind of wrapping up the basics of this world. You know, we're wrapping up the very obvious sort of Pale versus Kali. But I also don't, I've said this before, I don't want Kali to go away forever. So I want Kali to be defeated, but not, you know, destroyed or eliminated or what have you, because I find that character very interesting, and I still think there's a lot more that they could do with him. So I'm certainly hoping that we sort of get more of that. And Stars commented too, are there any scientists or researchers in this world with which new tech, energy resources, or just advanced living could be discovered? I suspect there must be, because there's sort of everything else, right? There's you know, soldiers, and there's agrarian workers, and there's you know, Jadu is clearly a scientist.
Yeah.
And it only stands to reason that there would be others. Jason has mentioned multiple times that he wants there to be, you know, engineers, and like all different kind of, you know, if there's sort of a human role that we know, he kind of wants there to be a representation of that in the world. He doesn't want to limit it to just like, these guys just fight against these guys, and that's everybody that exists in the world. Now, how that will sort of work itself out, we'll see.
I mean, if we're just speculating, you mentioned Jadu, who is obviously working with Kali and the Horrid, but I've always wondered if Mika, like, clearly she and Kali were sort of peers in a sense of being some of those first humans who were transformed.
Yes.
And I always kind of wondered, like, where was the split, right? There seemed in my brain, because this is not something that we've heard, but that of that group, there seems to have been, you know, this rogue group in Kali who were like, I refuse to accept what has happened to us. I refuse to accept that we are now, you know, living with nature and balance and all that. And that's where he embraced the tech, right? So on the one hand, I fully assume that a bunch of those scientists and engineer types are with the Horrid.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there were others who didn't quite live the life that the Chunari seem to have in the trees among nature and balance, but weren't necessarily down with Horde. So they might be out somewhere, like a whole other faction. For some reason, when you started talking, my brain went to like moles and underground creature scientists with like thick goggles, like
Yep.
doing stuff
Yeah.
underground that no one had no idea of, and then they pop up sometimes. So I don't know. That'd be fun. Or like there's a sunken, one of the arcs is underground and they're down there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I
don't know. Thoughts?
I know. Well, we'll get into that stuff. We'll get into different factions. We'll get into different characters. Before we do, though, I've sort of one more question. We're just about to tie up this first story arc with issue number 5.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the 5-issue story arc? You know, and then sort of by extension, what would be your ideal as far as like, you know, going forward, if Jason's going to do this comic book as a normal comic book available through your local comic book store, would you like to see it monthly, bi-monthly? Would you like to see, you know, story arcs and then a break in between each arc kind of thing? Like what, just riff on that a little bit. I sort of had some thoughts on that. That's why.
Well, let's do the first part. Did you mean story-wise? Where do we want it? Like resolution kind of a thing? Like, or because you said, what are your thoughts on the story arc? Or did you just mean the idea?
I mean, like in the
story
format of having it in 5 issues. Yeah.
I like the idea of introducing it. I will say, just because of production issues and obviously like this whole thing of trying to do a comic book while, you know, having to pause because you're running a toy company, got in the way. But in my mind, it was very much like, remember back in the day when we were introduced to G.I. Joe, right? So first there was a comic book for those of us that saw the Marvel comics. And then for the rest of the folks, there was a 5-episode mini series, right? It was going to be this week-long introduction of G.I. Joe and the struggle against Cobra, ruthless terrorist organization. And so that's kind of where I was thinking this was. It's just that, like, again, we got paused. Like, I don't know, there was an earthquake, so they couldn't air the last episode. So like, I just keep thinking, sorry, that was me during the second arc of the Weather Dominator back in LA. But
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was something like that. So I feel like the idea was great. Like, let's do a first 5 issue story arc, and then in a perfect world, it would have just bled into the next story arc. And if you look at this first 5 issues, it kind of does that setup of what is the world, who are the main players, and, you know, let's set up this conflict. And I like your idea of like, then we move in at the end of this one, we realize, oh, actually the conflict and the real stakes here are much larger than we thought. It could be another big bad. It could be it could just be a situation that they all have to address that might mean not necessarily pitting Chunari versus Horrid, or, you know, it might be some other thing that they have to figure out. And so I like the idea of this ending and going, oh, but wait, there's like this other thing that we have to deal with. We move into arc 2, which in traditional comic books style, I would prefer the monthly, not bi-weekly. Like, I just think that's like, that could just lead to
I meant bi-monthly, like 6 issues per year.
Oh, gotcha.
So is that semi-monthly? I don't know.
I could go either way, just in terms of like making sure that it comes out regular. Because if you're a comic book collector in the late 90s, you were all excited by all these like, oh, creator-owned comics are coming out. And then like you read the first 2 issues and then it's like months before the next one comes out. And that was very common. So like, if you were frustrated with Spiro, that was just the way it was. And
that was the way most comic books were. Yeah. Oh, it's still, I mean, let's be honest. Apart from Marvel and DC, it's still the way it is.
Yeah.
IDW is notoriously bad for delaying books, but
so I would love some regularity. I don't care if that means it has to be monthly or bi-monthly. There's something charming about the bi-monthly, but I just worry that we won't get enough story in between. And in the age of Netflix and streaming, I think people will lose interest pretty quick.
Yeah, it's hard because like I you know, I have kind of an unpopular opinion that I kind of like one story arc per year. So whether that's 5 issues or 6 issues or 12 issues, I like the idea of keeping it kind of, you know, keeping this sort of overarching idea that, like, you know, it's a season, and every
Yes, as you
season you
say, it's like
get, you know, a
old
season of
season TV show.
figures and a season of books and you know, a season of cartoons, you know, years in the future, right? And I just like that synchronicity of like having sort of the bookends of like the season.
I love
And I
that
would,
conceptually for sure. I
yeah.
love the idea that, as you say, like the toys would be that way.
Hmm.
Like right now, the toys were trying to do that, right? Essentially, the next wave that's going to come out would be the Gladiator wave, and that
Hmm.
in a perfect world would land like shortly after issue 3 and 4 when they're in that situation.
Hmm.
So on that note, I would rather it be. I'm good with a year long. I think that's awesome. Like, let's take them through this year. Let's plan it out with the toys, but maybe double the issues, like 12 issues or
I just
something.
thought, I actually just had another idea. What if it was 2 arcs per year, and sort of in between the arcs they could put like a one shot?
Hmm.
So you could have like, because that would allow them, uh you know, that would allow them a little bit of wiggle room where you could have, you know, you could have a guest artist on the one shot,
That's what I was gonna think. Yeah.
or like you could do,
Or say.
and then that way, story wise too, you could go, like, you could have an issue that was maybe a little bit lighter on story, so that Jason doesn't have to do quite as much work on that issue too. And then that way you could still
What
do sort of like
the
12.
classic sorry, the
Yeah,
classic,
the filler that just
pail and a tray, you go to the mall. Like,
yeah, yeah, the
I
swimsuit
remember that
issue or
after
something.
in X-Men, after, like, the massacre was like, "And then the girls go to the mall."
Yeah, it's like, "We're gonna go
And
buy a Discman." It's like, "What?
right.
What does this have to?" All right.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like, I think like monthly is great. Like getting something out every month.
Mhm.
But you know, to Red Five's point, can Jason do a monthly book? He's super busy.
Yeah, that seems
The goal ultimately, right? And this is, you know, behind the curtain a little bit. The goal ultimately is to take as much off of Jason's plate as myself and a couple other people possibly can, so that he can spend, you know, all of his time on the toys and the comic books and not worry about, um, you know, the business end of it and the logistical end of it and all that kind of stuff. So to that point, um we are working in that direction. However, at this point, I don't know that he could do monthly. As he wants to do monthly, I will tell you that much. Like, I straight up asked him, "Do you envision this being a monthly book?" And he says yes. I said, "Well, you're re-releasing issue 1 in March, so that gives you a buffer. You better get working." Ray Paz says he'd like to see it monthly. Nolan says, "I wouldn't mind seeing a 6-issue arc, one a month for 6 months." Yep, that would work too. Thanos says, "I'm actually fine with the pace that keeps the quality high. I've been reading Berserk for decades, and
sure.
I'm conditioned for hiatuses." That is an
Yeah.
awkward word to say.
The
Uh,
only challenge with that is it's your scale of both your fan base and, like, the culture. Like, I've in Japan, the manga and anime culture is very different, right?
yes.
And so, I don't know that the what's hot right now, US pop culture
Hmm.
could sustain that kind of weight. Because I've always been about that, like, yeah, just let it be however long it takes.
Hmm.
And unfortunately here, it's just like, "Hey, when's that next Marvel thing?" or
Hmm.
"When's that next Star Wars?" And then people get frustrated when it's not what they want, and then
Yeah.
everything burns. So,
I
I
think
don't
we're in
know.
a weird spot right now, though, too, because like Animal Warriors of the Kingdom is still small, right?
Yep, yep.
There's still lots of people that are getting
Sure.
into the book now, and they're
Mhm.
sort of like, "Oh, it's too bad that issue 1 is out of print. I'd really like to get it." And I'm like, "It came out like a year ago. Like, name
Yeah.
another book that a year later you can get issue 1." Like, that's just not really that feasible or reasonable. Um,
That's
I
streaming talk right there. Where can I just click and see it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it really is, right? Like we're so used to this stuff, and you can still get the PDF version.
You
So,
can. Yeah.
and I've been sending that out to people to make sure that people have the opportunity to read it. But Red 5 said maybe graphic novels would be best. Well, I think these are going to get compiled into trade paperbacks. So
Yeah.
I think, realistically, for people that missed out on the print books up to this point, trades are going to be a great way to go. Thanos said, great guest artist one shots would be great to see different takes on the character. Yeah, that's another thing, is that you could do, I mean, you said, Pale and Atreyu go to the mall, but you could do, there could be a Mother Mala when she was younger, right? Like you could explore characters that are sort of somewhat peripheral. You could do a one shot in the Lepus village. You could do like what's a day in the life of the rabbits.
That's not at all something you want to see, but yes.
I want to see it all. That's the thing. If I think of an idea, it's probably because I would want to read it. House Hendo's John says, did I miss anything juicy? No, we're just talking about the comic book. And we did mention that neither of us has read issue 5, so it's not as though we're withholding any information or anything like that. Ray says, if you want to gain new readers plus new fans into the toy line, you will have to keep the book going monthly. It's his creation, but reality-wise, that is what will help get new people into the line. I don't disagree at all. And I think, ultimately a more regular schedule is better. I've talked to Jason. Now, feel free to, this is just something that I'm going to throw out there because this is something that I've suggested to Jason. With the figures as well as the comic book, I think he should keep some in the bank and at the expense of sort of sitting on some stuff so that he can sort of have that buffer to release things on a more regular schedule, so that the interval between the comic books as well as the interval between waves of figures is more consistent, so that it's like, oh, it's been 2 months, a new comic book should be coming out, or it's been 4 months, a new line should be coming out, instead of just sort of rushing everything. That's gotten him into trouble, is why I sort of think that it's maybe advantageous to do that. But anyway, Ray Pass says, yeah, hopefully it gets an animated series, movie, or TV. Wouldn't that be great? Like ultimately that's the goal. That's Jason's dream, is to have a cartoon. And I think it's feasible. That's the other thing, is that when you see these things pop up on YouTube, and I know that a lot of them are probably, Kickstarter projects or a school project that whatever, time and money weren't really issues. But even just to see like a one shot, 30-minute long animated thing, even if they did like a pilot, would just be awesome, because it's because then you get the whole trifecta, right? You get the comic book, the cartoon, and the toy line. So Christopher Bouchard says, I'm new. What do you guys chat about? Found this on AWOK fan page on Facebook. Well, on Monkey Business, we do live, and we talk about the comic, we talk about the toys, we talk about whatever AWOK related. And then on Brick's channel, Brick Something on YouTube, we do another show called AWOK Talk, which is primarily pre-recorded videos that deal specifically with the comic book and the lore. So if you're interested in those, check them out. There's not a lot to catch up on for AWOK Talk. We've got about 5 or 6 videos, and I think about the same for Monkey Business. So you could realistically watch it all. If you're so inclined. Ray Pass is about keeping the profile high. Yeah, exactly. The toys will get the toy community. The book may get him into Hollywood, though. That's a good point. That's a good point.
That's where my brain is. It's like, you could technically, there's a world where you could take this first story arc, first 5 issues, and shop it around and to see if anybody would like to do what you described as either a 5-part, essentially like what the Motu Revelation and Upcoming Revolution, sorry, it's on the brain, are, where it's like it's a story, and really if you mash it and watch it all together, or same with Echo, it's like a long movie.
Yeah.
I could see someone sort of like, okay, could we do the animated version of essentially that same story? And there's no harm in doing that exact same story. One, obviously we're biased, but we think it's good. Two, I think it's very much written for that sort of modern sensibility, with each issue being, a significant portion of an episode, or maybe you spread some stuff across 2 episodes. And I could see them working on that. Like, imagine they were working on that now, probably wouldn't be released till like 2026. But by that time, the comic book continues and the story continues. And depending on how well that thing hits, maybe there's a follow-up. So, but he's 100% right in that I think like that multi-pronged entertainment approach while the toys continue would only be good for the toys. It's a tried and true model too.
Yeah.
Right. That's the challenge is, even in this day and age, in 2024, do enough eyeballs get on a Netflix animated show linked to a comic book series? It's a different landscape, but I definitely think
you need all the different things going on and firing for somebody to. That's the other thing too, is that the reality of things is that not everybody that reads the Ninja Turtle comic book buys the Ninja Turtle toys and went to see Mutant Mayhem. Some people are just into the comic book. Some people are just into the toys. Some people are just into the I was going to say media, but that's comic book as well. So like the TV and film stuff,
the screen stuff,
big and small. Yeah. Nolan makes a good point. It just takes a person to catch wind of the story. Sometimes it's that easy. Like when you hear about some things getting picked up, like, now I can't remember what it's called. And Rick Remender did a comic book, and it was like high school kids that they go to high school that trains them to be assassins. What is it called? Deadly Class is an amazing show based on a wild comic book. And when it was announced that they were doing a TV show, people were like, what is this? Like, no one had heard of the comic book. So it's I think it's just within the realm of possibility that somebody's just gonna like be the right person to have this comic book come across their desk.
Was that Netflix?
No, that was like I don't know who it was, because I'm in Canada, so I think it was on Showcase here, which means it could have come from any sort of network.
Only because that there was a time when Netflix was like had a lot more money to throw around to try and develop their own IP to compete with, when they knew that Disney was going to pull all their stuff off of Netflix and start their own channel. Same with Warner's, etc. So there was a time when they were actively like looking for comic book creators specifically, right? They with like what's the dude who did like, anyway, you get the premise. But so they were like going after comic book creators, and that's where they got like, I don't know if Deadly Class was a part of that, if there was Netflix or not. The Umbrella Academy,
but that's equal. I mean, Deadly Class is kind of in that vein of like weird oddball, but the story is like really compelling. And
so I think they were actively looking for that stuff. Nimona. I don't know if you ever saw Nimona by ND Stevenson. Same kind of thing, right? It was just like, oh, there are these creators, and they worked with ND to do the who did Lumberjanes. They did the She-Ra too. So they worked with them to do a massive IP through DreamWorks production of She-Ra. And then they were like, hey, we love your stuff too. Can you turn Nimona into a series or show or whatever it was? So I don't know. I don't know if what the mood is of the town right now, Hollywood, and if they're still sort of in that mode. But this is like, all that to say, it's possible and there's precedent. Like if Spiro continues with the comics, now that they're picked up with major distribution, depending on how that hits at comic book stores, if it becomes like a comic book thing, and then the action figures are there, and us nerds in this room continue to put it out there, like who knows, because it's a whole new thing. It's like, I can imagine it being very attractive to a Netflix type place, where it's like, yeah, they're building up a toy line that's connected to this thing. Can we support?
Yeah, that's a good point. There's already sort of like there's already a framework there. There's already a substructure that they can use to sort of leverage. There's admittedly not a huge fandom, right? But maybe the two kind of piggyback on each other and kind of help
and
each
they're
other
good
out
with
in that
that
way.
because that means they can get it for cheap. No, but
Yeah,
to be real,
not wrong.
and it hits that fun demographic. Like if you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, it's not like some of these other properties that we see in toys that might be a little bit too edgy and might really like be targeted to like a adult boy thing. But there's a lot going on here where it could hit adults, young people, across the gender spectrum, whatever. Like I just feel like there's so much going on in this storytelling. And then there's all the things that we talk about in our past videos where, hey, this reminds us of Terminator, this reminds us of Alien, this reminds us of Thundercats and Planet of the Apes, where I feel like there's enough of those touchstones to pull in some other people who are like, ooh, this is like good genre stuff. I'm into it. So
yeah, it's not, and that's a good point too, where a lot of people might see, hey, I fixed mine.
I know. Do 2 thumbs. Do 2.
Well, I didn't want to do the same thing.
That's okay. It's like singing. Do Michael Jackson.
What's the other one? You get like rain, 2 thumbs down's rain. Anyway, we'll do more of those, but because I updated my system. Anyway,
I know.
It was driving me crazy that it didn't work for a while. What was I going to say? In the way that something like Netflix has their Masters of the Universe, Revolution, Revelation, all that kind of stuff. I think there's still going to be people that sort of look at that and they're like, oh, I'm not really a He-Man guy, so I'll skip that one. But as you said, with Animal Wars of the Kingdom, there's no 40 years of history. There's no sort of like embedded fandom as such. And I think, new fans such as ourselves, there's only new fans. So anybody that's a fan is a new fan. That was sort of an inane thing to say. Fans of the property are sort of open.
I've been here since 2023.
Exactly. I'm back to Kickstarter, way back. Well, I guess Animal Warrior has been around a little bit longer than that when you go back to original graphic novels. So like 2018 goes way back to 2018.
Yeah, AWOK sold out with that whole Primal Battle thing.
I was into it before it was cool. Star, that's a good question though. Would Jason be willing to look at a screenplay of his story if someone wrote it? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. He really likes to have control over the creative stuff. I think it's still pretty young, and so I don't know that he would. I mean, I'm sure he'd be open to it. He's not a screenwriter, so the way that he writes is pretty cinematic already. But I don't know. I don't know.
If he's talking to anybody about those kind, like a lawyer or whatever, he would probably have been advised not to.
Oh yeah, as far like unsolicited, he would. Yeah, but I think
just to address it, because Star brings it up. I don't know if maybe Star knows
don't
this
sell
or anybody
don't
else.
send him a script. Nobody should just send him a script.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, if they read it, like that opens up the claim that like if he ends up doing the thing, even though it's like his property and he knows the characters, if he does anything marginally similar to what people suggested, now it's a question of, did he steal my screenplay? So in general, a lot of creators are like, I can't, thank you, I can't read anything.
Look at it. Yeah. Thanos Copter says, don't forget a video game. That would be fun too. I mean, I'd be happy with just like a free game that you download on your phone just to have something sort of fun to mess around with. But
I'd be happy with an AWOK mod that I can put onto like, Legends of Zelda, like Legends of Zelda.
Yeah.
Just make Link pale and just run around and like.
Even if you could do so my kid just got Super Mario Wonder for Christmas, and you can play as like any character.
Yep.
Even if you could do that, right? Like just throw them in there and just have it. So the game wouldn't have to be crazy. It could be one of those games that's just meant to be fun. It doesn't have to be like super hard or like super crazy or anything like that.
Yep.
It would be fun.
Jeff Morris.
Thanos that's actually a good shout. That it could just be a fighting game. You could just have like a Street Fighter style 1v1, and they could each have moves. And Pale could pull out his little hook daggers, and Kali could pull out his blaster. Like, yeah, I mean that
That's his.
That'd be simple. That'd be a quick one to do, I would think.
Yeah. Sorry. What do you call that when games like you build up your power and then your special move or whatever? That would be his like move.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
he's fighting whatever, and then he just pulls out his gun.
Like,
no, I'm thinking of it's a tangent, but somewhat AWOK related. Savage Crucible hopefully is dropping this year. That's something I'm looking forward to. But in those early days of kind of like talking about the line, Rob Post, is that the name? Yeah, was going around saying like, yeah, we've talked to like other lines too, like in our similar position, like AWOK. He's specifically named Jason from AWOK. And because the sort of story conceit of Savage Crucible has so much to do with it, it's not a spoiler. It's like the first thing you learn about the Savage Crucible is that they're pulling in people from different universes into this world, and then they're put into like gladiator type games. And he specifically name checked, like, for example, like I've had conversations with Jason about the possibility of bringing AWOK characters into the Savage Crucible world. And like if there isn't a what exactly Thanos said, like a fighting game for Savage Crucible, one, that would be like a super missed opportunity. But two, if you then didn't use that as the vehicle to like invite other indie lines, like
that's a good
Jason
like,
to be
hey,
like,
you have an
dude,
IP
here's a skin.
that isn't in a video game. Why do you throw them in the fighting?
Make it happen, people.
That would be cool, because then you just have to develop, one character at a time kind of thing. And you could even do it in a way where the art style, if you've got an art style sort of already connected, the Savage Crucible characters can look like they do in the comic, and Pale can come in and kind of look different, like Spider-Verse kind of thing, right? Where because you're pulling them out of a different universe, they don't have to change sort of the aesthetic from that universe.
That's so true. Yeah.
Like how
it's
spoiler alert, how like Vulture shows up in sort of that Da Vinci paper thing.
Yeah. Pencil.
He's like, what is going on here? Mocking all the art in the art gallery. Right. I thought was pretty funny and clever.
Very.
House Hendo says, how about something like first Clone Wars cartoon, 2 to 5 minute shorts, but edit them into an episode at the end of the year? So that's not a bad idea, where you get pieces that sort of add up to something bigger. G.I. Joe did that. The most recent G.I. Joe animated was
that's
Joe
right.
Resolute. And it was 5-minute long sections on YouTube that added up to, I think it's about 50 minutes, full length. I still think that whoever did that did it without Hasbro understanding what they had agreed to, but everybody loves it. So, let's see. I'm going through the chat here quickly, and then we'll sort of jump back into the comics. One thing that I did think of when we were talking about, the different IPs that it's sort of similar to, and this is something that's just absolutely, couldn't have been timed any better, in my opinion. But Thundercats coming back as a comic book in February, before Animal Warriors of the Kingdom gets distribution in March, I think is just super, super lucky, because if people kind of get switched on to Thundercats, it seems like a very easy transition to pick up this book next month that looks on the surface quite similar. And that was, to the point of me saying, like, you don't have to be an Animal Warriors of the Kingdom fan. You can pick your influence that you see in there, right? You could be like, oh, that kind of reminds me of this, and I think that they've got that going for them.
Totally.
But the fact that it's still very much, it's still open to a young audience. Like, it's not graphically violent. Well, I mean, it is, but it's not sort of cartoon violence, if we want to call it that, rather than more graphic violence. So I think the market is potentially pretty big for this. So let's see,
guys, come on, comic book store owners, put that right there on the.
I'll say this. I mean, if you're
right next to each other,
the two covers. If you're a comic book fan, get into your comic book shop and order the book, and ask them to bring in an extra copy, not just the copy for you. Because most comic book stores, if you go in there and you're like, hey, there's a new book, it's issue 1. Issue 1s typically do well. Issue 1s, you can potentially hit a new audience. The comic book store owner will sort of know what his audience buys in their sort of pull lists and stuff like that. And this might be a book that they just didn't know anything about. I haven't seen the previews book for it yet. I don't know what it looks like in terms of like how it's presented in previews. So whether comic book shops will sort of naturally just come across it, I don't know. So that's why I'm kind of saying for people to get out there and
have you seen their ads for the toys? Because that's been in there, hasn't it? Have there been solicits for the toys in past previews?
And previews went hard on that.
Yeah, it was ads, right? Big one-page ad.
It was like 4. It was on 4 or 5 different pages.
Oh, okay.
I mean, Diamond is all it. Like Diamond asked Jason to carry the line after sort of hearing what it was. And Jason spoke to Diamond about like, can we figure out a distributor? And they said, you're already doing the hard work. We'll put it in previews. Like the only thing Jason doesn't have by self-publishing it is and I don't know if it's even relevant, but like, do people go on marvel.com and look up like the latest books? I don't even know if they do. I think most people just sort of hear about it through comic book news sites and through Previews magazine. Like that's where I don't know that those guys still have the same kind of monopoly on how things work, with social media being really the sort of driver for a lot of this stuff. I think that between Diamond and Previews magazine and just what AWOK is already doing, I think they're already off to a pretty good start. So and I lost my place in the comments, so I'm just trying to find it again. House Hendo says the only possible issue that I could see when this branches out is the usual naysayers. But here's my opinion on that. And this is what I've said to
my face people, wasn't not just to Hendo, by the way. My face was to the naysayers. But go ahead.
Brick and I have talked about this multiple times. There's nothing new. You're not gonna reinvent, an action hero. This is. This goes back to ancient Greek mythology and stuff like that. Like you're not ever going to be immune from somebody saying this reminds me of this.
Yeah.
And I think that if this reminds people of something that they love, then they're probably more likely to give it a chance. Now, if they're sort of that vocal minority that's just there to say negative things and say like, this is crap because it's too similar to something. Yeah, there you go. You got Frazetta, you got Conan, you got Frazetta, you got He-Man, you got all those properties that like, come on, you can change them from dark hair to blonde hair, but it's still the same guy.
But it's still great, right? Yeah, like, and most people don't maybe even realize, this existed like 50 years ago. They were aware of this, or like this is like a new toy that just came out. I bet there are people who are like, oh, what is that? That's totally He-Man. Like, what is this? Like, we've seen this before, like, but yeah, there are a lot of like just stories out there. There's the whole idea of like a, universal mythology and like that we all draw from. And I don't know. I think that only becomes an issue when folks are like, oh, IP copying, etc. That's only when we embrace the idea of IP. Like the notion that there is such a thing as like intellectual property that can be protected because it's so unique and so original. Right? Did I do that? Oh, it's because I did this when I was doing air quotes. That's right.
Air quotes gets you balloons.
Like, yeah, and it's only that's the only real issue, I think. And as we were raised, and I noticed my kids, our kids are roughly the same age. My kids say this all the time. The youngest, the 10-year-old, is always saying, "Oh, isn't that copyright?" I was like, "Wait, what? What are you?" He's trying to say. He's trying to say like, "Isn't that copying something that already exists?"
Right.
But he uses it that way, like, "Oh, isn't that copyright?" Like, meaning, didn't they just copy that from somebody else? And I was like, "Oh, that's fascinating." But they're hyper aware of it because I think of what what House Hendo's pointing out, that there are this naysayer culture that have that line,
but in a weird way, and Jeff Morris, thank you for this comment, because this kind of, there's a parallel thing here. Jeff Morris says AWOK Fortnite skins. Fortnite is 100% just bring your IPs. We're here for you. We're gonna get you skinned into the game.
Yep.
And no one's like, Fortnite's stupid because it just rips off IPs. It's like, well, that's the premise, right? Like, it just, that's what people get into Fortnite. Because I downloaded Fortnite when Snake Eyes appeared. I couldn't get Snake Eyes because I would have had to pay a whole bunch of money, so I never played it again. But yeah, I mean, the idea that you know, any IP is really truly an original IP is a hard argument for somebody to convince me of. But you know,
especially
I think
when
it's how you do it. I think it's what you do with the influences. You know, I think of, when I think of something like that, I think of food, right? There's dishes that have been around forever, right? But a McDonald's hamburger versus, you know, a Michelin star restaurant hamburger is not the same hamburger. Nobody's gonna be like, they ripped off McDonald's. You can play in the same sandbox and still build a much different castle, is what I'm saying. It's the way that you kind of do that and what you do with it that really makes something truly special. And I think that AWOK really does have a quality about it, a je ne sais quoi, that just that elevates it above a lot of comic books, to be honest. And then the fact that there's a toy line that goes with it. I've said this lots before, but like, to me, the Animal Warriors of the Kingdom comic book is like, it stands alone as a good comic book. And the figures, it's cool that we have both of those things, because I absolutely love both of those things. But if one of them disappeared, I would still continue with the other. It's not, you know, it's not a ash can comic thrown into the packaging to tell you about, you know, the next wave of figures. It's a good comic with a good story. What do we want to see in the second story arc? We have gone way off topic.
No, but and I think but that's kind of this funny place where we're at, because we haven't talked. We have been talking with one another. Oh, we recorded with Jason too, right? That was, or we did a show with Jason where a lot of this came out, and I just sort of feel like so much is like what's going to happen in the story, but also the sort of like larger conversation with what's happening with the brand is super exciting. So I think that's why we're kind of in this mode. And I don't think it's totally speculation out of nowhere. I think they're very much like positioned. The AWOK brand and Spiro are positioned to maybe take advantage of some of the things that people are bringing up. Hey, what if there was a show? What if there was this and all this, you know, like, I think it's there now. The capacity that Spiro has at the moment is going to be the biggest limiting factor, because they definitely have a lot of things going on, right? And you alluded to that, but it's not just AWOK right now. They're also about to kick into Bushido. And so, and then they're going to launch a whole new Kickstarter to get us new figures and new bucks in the toy line for AWOK, while releasing a more regular comic book accessible in stores. So
no, it's, yeah, I mean,
so I think it's fair that we're on tangent time, because there's just it's both exciting. It's just super exciting. But
yeah,
fair
I mean,
enough. We should probably talk about
in a lot of ways. I mean, it feels as though Spiro and a lot of these things, right? Christopher Bouchard says, "I back Savage Crucible, Armies of Eden, Cyberzoic, and Combat Creatures." I think we're sort of on the precipice of kind of a monumental shift in collecting. I think that we've gotten to the point where a lot of vintage collectors that I know kind of have most of the stuff that they want. And then a lot of us that were vintage collectors have sort of just moved over to modern stuff. And you sort of check off all the lists of like, okay, well, now I got my Joes, now I got my Star Wars stuff, now I got my Marvel stuff. What else is out there? And I think that Animal Warriors of the Kingdom Cyberzoic, Armies of Eden, Armies of Ashmore, Defenders of Eden, Armies of Ashmore. He mixed the two of them up, but Savage Crucible, Combat Creatures, Galactic Force or something. I can't remember what they're called. But like there's
ones. Yeah.
Meta Travelers, you know, all these new toy lines are coming out with such cool stuff, and a bunch of them are doing comic books, and like I think we're about to just like kickstart this thing. Forgive the sort of use of that word out of current context. But we're about to sort of kickstart this sort of new wave of what we remembered as kids. And I hear this argument all the time that like, oh, you know, collecting will die with us, right? The IPs that 40-year-old men are collecting will die. That's just the nature of it. If there's not new IPs for kids to sort of get into early and sort of, will collecting die? I don't know. Maybe it'll change. Maybe it'll adapt. Maybe the IPs will look different. So when people say like collecting dying, I'm like, well, maybe the G.I. Joe IP doesn't have the same shine as it did. Maybe the He-Man IP doesn't have the same shine as it did. Maybe Ninja Turtles doesn't. Ninja Turtles seems to be doing pretty well, but they seem to be the exception. But you know, a lot of these IPs I think are losing steam, and I think there's the door is just open enough for all these guys to get in, and girls, women, to get in with their new idea, their new property, their new take on the hero's journey, their new take on, you know, good versus evil, and whether that's a sci-fi or a fantasy or real world or whatever. It's an exciting time to be sort of, you know, involved in all this pop culture stuff and toys.
I hate to be redundant because I know I'm coming back. Like this has been the weekend of Masters of the Universe Revelation because Revolution's coming out. Good. But like it's a perfect example of what you're saying. When Masters of the Universe Revelation came out, there was a lot of backlash even from longtime fans and even before the thing came out. Mm-hmm. And what we were talking about on Friday over on Geek DF Out, one thing that came up was that I was sort of sharing my thoughts that like Revelation is very much like 21st century storytelling, mm-hmm. Including the kinds of topics you hit, the kinds of characterization that people might be looking for, but applying it to an IP that existed when we were kids. And in many ways, like maybe it was for kids like myself who liked that back in the 80s, but has experienced a bunch of life in the last 30 years or so. Mm-hmm. And then now I'm looking for stories that fill a particular need because I'm just in a different place. And so unlike there were some people that didn't like it. I was one of those people that really enjoyed it.
I liked it.
But it becomes this thing where I get it, where people are like, no, I was expecting this thing that was very much like, and so I'm bringing that up because I feel like they tried to take an old IP, which was very much like, I think it has life in it. I think it has legs in it. It's great, but they tried to bring it into the modern era. And I think Star Wars did a very similar thing. I think Marvel's doing a very similar thing where they're trying mm-hmm. to bring old stuff into the now. And it's rubbing up against a lot of people with maybe existing expectations of a certain type of experience they had with those characters in those worlds before. Mm-hmm. The advantage that Spiro has is that they don't have to deal with that. It's kind of like what, you know, we've had this conversation with like about Super 7 and people have a lot of frustration and disappointment around Super 7. But like a lot of it, I think, is more so I'm frustrated with Super 7 because I like Ninja Turtles so much and you're ruining Ninja Turtles. Or I'm frustrated with Super 7 because they have G.I. Joe and I like G.I. Joe and they're not doing G.I. Joe the way I want it. But then the other people are like, yo, the worst. That's dope. Oh mm-hmm. my God, a Biggie figure. Yeah. And like, mm-hmm. it's, so I think Spiro's in a great position to just be like, this is totally new. We've mm-hmm. got some fans that were here for like a year.
We got some old school fans. We've been around since 2022.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us who are into it just feel like like we're here for the ride and would be just be
Yeah.
excited to see something that we've been geeky into from a Kickstarter and with toys turn into something bigger. And I agree with you that this could be a new era for just pop culture. I think we need it. Like we need something new. Otherwise, we're all going to be fighting about like, oh, they're doing that
Yeah.
thing wrong. It's like, okay, well then let's not do that thing anymore.
Yeah, the gatekeeping of
Yeah.
like, this isn't what Star Wars is supposed to be, or this isn't, what Motu is supposed to be. It's like, what does that even mean? Like,
Yeah.
based on what is that based on? Where's
Yeah.
your like, what's the data that
Yeah.
that sort of supports your premise and your hypothesis? Cause yeah, I say it all the time. Like all canon is somebody's head canon, and if you don't like the canon, it's because
Sorry,
you're
Johnny.
not in charge. So it's like
Mhm.
get over it. Write your own fan fiction. I mean, that's there you go. Move on. So let's write our own fan fiction. What do we want to see in the second story arc? Let's start off with sort of some, or do we want to go general and sort of drill down to some more specifics, or
Yes,
is there
yes.
any character that you would like to see more of? Like,
Yes.
is there sort of is there a character who you would like to drive the second story arc? I think with the first story arc, we
Yes.
really had a story A and a story B. We had Pale and Kali, and Pale's was sort of a personal journey, and Kali, I think you could argue, was like the driving force for the plot by and large.
So for me, just in terms like there's smaller characters that I'm like, oh, I want to see more. But then there are larger characters that have been introduced and we're getting hints at that I think could really like be critical to the overall story. And I think, for example, Jadu, kind of named them before. Like what exactly is Jadu's role in the Horrid? Is she really just sort of I follow Kali and he's running the show, or am I really running the show and I'm tolerating this guy until I can figure out some scientific thing and then I'll be rid of him? Like, and I feel like she has a lot more insight into what's going on than it's seemingly anybody else in this world. So
we talked way back, I think, in like AWOK Talk, like 1, where we were like, is she really in charge? Because like if she's the one that has to kind of like push the buttons to bring Kali back every time he's sort of put into a new clone, she really has the power, because she could not push the button, and then what would happen? So yeah, I agree with you. I want there to be more Jadu. I want there to be more. I want to see more creatures. Like we got the Void, and we got that big sort of gnarly kind of boar creature that was a Jadu beast.
Yeah.
I would
Jadu's
love
real
to see,
beast.
yeah. Like I would love to see more of that stuff. I would love to see sort of Kali pushed aside and Jadu kind of step to the forefront and be like, okay, you had your turn, but let a grown-up do it. Let somebody with like some ideas and some actual, planning, because Kali doesn't seem like the master strategist that I think Jadu sort of supports him to be.
Yeah, I will say, on that note, that's the one thing that I'm still waiting to see why he's such a threat. I felt the same way as a kid with like Skeletor or Cobra Commander. I was like, after seeing these guys fumble and fail so many
You're like,
times,
what am I missing here?
Like, yeah, come on, Destro, can you just take over now? Or
Yeah.
like, like, come on, Destro, Mindbender, and which I guess they did in creating Serpentor. But it's just like, yeah, I haven't seen it yet. The figure in my headcanon, sorry, had him a little bit more effective than he was.
Yeah, me too.
in the comic book.
Well, I mean, in the Kickstarter, the Primal Kickstarter, where we got the 6-inch action figures, we didn't know anything about Mala or Jadu or King Hannibal, or like any of these characters that have very major roles in the comic book.
Yep.
And so I think all just assumed that the big bad was the big bad, but maybe he's not the big bad. He's like the mid-level boss. and we have to get to the end level, sort of thing. So I think I would like to see that happen. And the example that I actually think of is more of like Darth Vader and Palpatine. Like Vader is the threat on the ground, but Palpatine was always, manipulating, and Vader worked for Palpatine. That's maybe that gets retconned a little bit, but even by the end of, even if you look at the original trilogy, like Palpatine was always sort of there. And I want that. Like I want the curtain to be pulled back, and I want there to be like, oh, you guys thought that was it. That once you defeat Kali, you can go back to your pastoral life living in the jungle.
Yep.
No, that's not the case. The journey doesn't end there. That's the beginning of the journey. You just now have a better understanding of the next step. And I don't necessarily need every story arc to sort of lead to the next big bad. I think you can come back. I think you could come back to Kali, right? Kali could get smarter. Kali could get
read a book, Kali.
No, yeah. Learn some science, dum. Do it for yourself. But
did you have any? You asked me, but and we
characters?
Yeah.
I still want to see this sort of A and B. I still want there to be like an undercurrent of Pale's development, like Pale as a individual, like learning about himself, because I find that interesting, and I think there's still a lot of untapped potential in that storyline. But Jadu, character-wise, I want more Jadu. I mean, that's and more Mala as well. Like we've been sort of told that Mala is a magic user. We've been told that there's magic users in this world, but we haven't really seen magic. We've seen science, but we haven't seen magic. And I want there to be more of an interplay there, because the whole idea that magic is just science that you kind of can't explain, and once you can explain it, it's then science, and there's a balancing act there. I want to see that kind of come through, but that's more sort of plot wise than it is character wise. Star says, I always saw AWOK as a story where the characters would go on a grand quest to find the AI. The AI could be a big bad too, right? It could be, and Stars had a couple comments about the AI. The AI could be benevolent. It could be that it's going to come up later. It could be that it's a big bad. We could see. We talked about this too, I think, right? We could see like an Ultron type thing, where we could see the AI become a physical character at some point, which would also be interesting. But there's tons of stuff going on. It looks like Jason's dropped in to supervise and make sure
he didn't take me up on my challenge, which was the next comment.
Where is it? Let's see. Tell us all the plans and secrets. Go. Derek's here as well. What's going on, guys? Let's see. Anything else in the comments here? Are there any characters that you would like to see less of? I guess this question is really more, is there any character that you're like,
are they done moving on?
Yeah, like, is that their role fulfilled, and can we kind of move on?
Before that, let me just say that there is a character that I often forget about, and I don't know why. I forgot about the figure, and it bums me out a little bit because he's dope, and I feel like there's a lot that needs to be explored here, and that's Blight. I feel like he's kind of been thrown into the mix, right, to create this complication around who Pale is, right, and what Pale is. And I think there's a lot of rich storytelling potential there for him. For those of you, again, who aren't following, Blight is so Pale. Just a spoiler, we've done it before. So Pale, our hero, finds out that he's actually a clone of the main villain that we've been talking about.
I can't pull all the figures off the shelf, but for the sake of
Kali, Kali, there you go. Kali has a cloning program essentially designed to help him basically, I don't know, get past some kind of thing that's happening to him where he reverts or changes back. We've seen different versions of him transform uncontrollably into something that looks more human, and then to super angry, and then he comes back to his sort of like more in control persona. And then we kind of talked about at the beginning that there was a revealed action figure version of Kali called Kali Prime, where he's like hulked out basically. So they've been doing this cloning program run by essentially Jadu, the main scientist that we were referring to earlier. And they find out that they were thinking that essentially all their experiments to create a body that Kali can essentially be something into. They haven't actually said if he's transferring what. It hasn't been clear, but they needed to develop a more stable body because every past experiment of a clone has failed. They say that it's couldn't keep its integrity or whatever. So they later find out that the first functional, I guess, successful clone that didn't have the same sort of problems of the past ones has been taken away and hidden away to live a life among the Chitauri. And they find out that this prince of the Chitauri, Pale, is essentially like the first quote unquote successful clone experiment. So they try and get him, but in the meantime, Jadu is still on the quest to continue the experiments. And then later it's announced after they capture Pale that, oh, wait, we now have the ability and knowledge somehow, because science, to actually create an additional successful clone, and that's Blight. And so there's this dynamic all of a sudden where Kali's like, I don't even need you anymore, Pale. Like there's that vibe in it, but we haven't yet fully explored it. So it's funny, like that's a whole plot point that we haven't dug into. I wonder how much that's going to play into the next story arc. I wonder if he potentially is this third force that becomes problematic, like maybe a bigger threat. Or is there the potential for him and Pale to get together and say F dad, and like who knows, right? There's all sorts of potential there. So I just want to name him before we get into characters that we want to see maybe less of. I think there needs to be a lot more exploration of who Blight is. So,
well, I think it lends. Sorry, before
I guess let's give George their moment.
Hello.
Baby George is.
I know he's staring at the TV saying hello over and over and over again.
Okay. Hey,
hi, George. I think an exploration into sort of Blight's character also leads to that exploration of the science and the animal versus human DNA. Are they separable? Are they sort of fused? Are natural born animal warriors animals, or are they born human and they change, all that I think could come up with an exploration of Blight. So I think that definitely would be good. I mean, we also have plot wise, getting a little bit wider, but if you start at character based, Lexion has not been in the comics, right? So we haven't seen the pirates.
That's right.
But we also know that there's more pirates coming in terms of the figures. There's Lexion is from the Pirate Guild, but we have Boone coming in the Kickstarter, and then potentially Grimes as well. And
remind me, Boone and Grimes.
Boone is the Fox, which will be on the slimmer Speedster buck. And then Grimes would be potentially an unlock of the Brawler buck. Okay. So
real quick, you've used Speedster buck and Brawler buck before, and I've never asked you that. Is that terminology you're hearing from Sierra? Or is that your got it? Okay.
Yes. The bucks in the Kickstarter are the Brawler buck, which is the Void, that mid-sized buck. Then the female buck, which is the women that we haven't had yet, Mala, Jadu, and then potentially more beyond that. The speedster is the slim guy, so that's going to be the rabbit as well as a fox, and then the reptile buck. It was originally called the lizard buck, but it sort of lends itself to other not lizards, so it's a reptile buck.
Yep.
And then beyond that, maybe more. So just stay tuned for the Kickstarter. But we're not talking about the Kickstarter. But we are talking about characters that we are going to see in figure form that we haven't seen in the comic book. And so I think there could be that right now. While I've said that this comic book isn't just sort of a way to get new figures out, Jason has said repeatedly that as the comic book evolves and develops, the characters are going to be introduced, and those characters would then theoretically kind of show up in the line. So I want more pirates. The Pirate Guild was established with Lexion, but we have not seen the pirates, and I think that could really mix things up. I don't necessarily see the pirates as being the big bads. I see them being more of a chaotic element thrown into the mix. Like faction wise, I think they're really, really fun, but I think they'll be just that, pirates. I think they'll be opportunistic and sort of advantageous in their interactions with any other faction, but not really loyal to anybody. So I think they can kind of just be sprinkled in wherever to just add a little bit of chaos whenever needed, which I think works really, really well.
Jason did say in the chat that Lexion will be heavily featured in the second story arc.
So there you go. There's your part answer. So we're gonna see more pirates, right? Like that's it's the cat, fox, and dog are out of the bag. There's pirates, and so we'll be seeing those soon, hopefully. Now there's a lot of comments here. I'm trying to keep up. Star, I'm trying to keep up with your comments, but they're long, and it Star says Blight feels to me like Kali, what Starscream is to Megatron. Someone close is just waiting for his chance to undermine Kali. Yeah, that's a good take. That we could see King Blight. I don't know Transformers lore very well, but I think there was King Starscream. I don't know
then get shot and turn. Yeah, I don't know if you remember exactly what that reference is, but King.
Not
King
at all.
Starscream.
I've just seen the figure. So.
Yeah, it's a good one. Have you seen the gray one?
No.
Okay.
Gray Starscream?
King one. Spoiler alert. I'll just tell you. He gets shot and turns to ash.
Oh, cool.
Anyways. Yeah, good stuff.
The figure. I've seen the gray. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. There was I started a couple more comments here too. Now I mentioned the pirates. I want more pirates. Is there a faction that you want to see more of? There's a bunch of factions that we've seen that we know exist, right? Like Boviticus, Pachydyne.
You're moving on, but you asked a question earlier we skipped over. Who do you not want to see?
Oh, who do you not want to see?
Want to see less of? No, not a whole. I mean, actually, I guess at this point, I would like to maybe move on a little bit, away from Kali as he is right now, being the sort of this is the big, it's kind of what we've been saying. Maybe less of the, I don't know. I'd like to see less of the horrid as we know it, and maybe some horrid kind of getting annoyed with Kali's leadership, and maybe just kind of going their own. It's the same thing with, again, I'm still in Motu, but it's like, dude, at a certain point, you just stop being one of Skeletor's henchmen because there's no point. Or at a certain point, you leave Cobra because you're losing every time, So anyways, how about you?
Yeah, it's kind of Kali, because I think that his story, insofar as we've seen in this arc, I think is enough. I have said this, even in this episode, that I don't want Kali to die. Like, I don't want him to be eliminated from the story forever.
Right.
That being said, I now just realized that he could be killed, but that wouldn't be the end of Kali. because
of his technology.
He keeps getting put into new bodies anyway. So maybe we could have a break from him being in a physical body, but still, have. He seems like the easiest one to kill off in that respect, because you could actually have him die, but it wouldn't be a retcon to like bring him back, 2 or 3 story arcs down the line. It'd be like, well, no, I mean, we've been putting his consciousness into clones this whole time. We just forgot to do it the last time. We forgot to hit the reset button. Jadu forgot to hit the reset button. Like I said, there
conveniently,
you go. Like, I'll do it tomorrow. I got other things I got to get done today. But yeah, it's because I think Kali's character has had the like, there's the least, and I'm gonna have to sort of explain this. I think Kali's characters had the least intrigue to me. And because his intrigue is more connected to Jadu than it's connected to him. So I want more Jadu because I want more of that sort of backstory of the cloning process. And they talked about, they've had different, they've used different bodies. We have Kali Prime. With the different bucks in the line now for the toys, I'm thinking you could do a slimmer, stealthier speedster buck Kali, where like, for a specific mission or a specific task or whatever, right? Sure. Like you could effectively put him in any body, and that's not Kali doing that, right? That's Jadu doing that. So I don't need Kali for Jadu to do what she does.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, if he could evolve and come back bigger, badder, not necessarily bigger, because he is going to be bigger in issue 5. He's going to be Kali Prime, but bigger in terms of stature, plot wise, smarter, faster, whatever, like more of a threat, maybe more dynamic a threat next time he comes back. So I don't want to get rid of him. I just want him to sort of step aside and let, to that extent too, like the Horrid. I mean, I would like to see more of the world explored. I would like to see more sort of geographic locations. I would like to, when we went to the Rabbit Village, I was like, this is cool. Like, this is a different village. The aesthetic is different. The structures are different. Everything is different for these guys. And I want to see more of those. And sort of connected to that, I would like to learn more about, like, well, how did these factions establish themselves? How come they developed this way? How come Chunari is primarily ape? How come, this is primarily a rabbit village? How come Feralist is all cats? Like, is there a faction apart from Horrid where there's more sort of interspecies crossover? Are there villages where there's people that are non-tribal, right? Like, are there people that aren't part of a house or part of a tribe that just live? And what does that look like? And why have they done that? Why are they not part of a tribe, sort of thing? So, Star, I think we kind of touched on this, the idea of killing off a main character. I'm not opposed to it. I just think that, you
dies?
have to. What's that?
Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, okay, next we have to ask who dies.
Well, yeah, that was what I was gonna say, is like, I don't want some of the characters to die that you would potentially want back. And I think what we've seen when G.I. Joe kills somebody or Transformers kills somebody is that it doesn't typically go over very well, and it doesn't last for very long, which is why I think Kali, you could kill him without having to get rid of the character, and so you'd still have him at your disposal if you wanted him back. But if it worked, within the story, I'm not opposed to it at all, because it's a realistic function of how things work.
Sure.
I think you just have to, you know, if Jason wants to kill off a character, I have no problem with that, but he better not come back unless there's precedence that says this guy could come back. You're thinking really hard about a character, or
I was totally, I was trying to think of a character, like who could die?
Who would be the
There's
first
just
to
not
go?
there's not
Mother
enough
Mala. I mean, Mother
going
Mala
on
died in
yet.
issue 1.
Yeah, I meant more. Yes, that's actually where I was thinking. It's like, oh, I still would like a Mala toy, even though she's dead. And then my brain started going like, hey, Jason, don't kill anybody off before you release the action
Before you release the figure. Well, okay, so let's maybe explore this a little bit more. If he was gonna kill off a character, would you want it to be one of the youngins or one of the oldies? Like, would it be more impactful, or would it be like, would it sort of disrupt things? Like if it was Pale or Atreyu versus Thane or Hannibal, like would you sort of lean one way or the other?
I think both would be impactful. I think one of the younger ones who maybe was set up as being important and then pulling the rug under us and then realizing, oh no, like they're gone. I thought there was going to be so much more, would be pretty powerful, and I'm sure would piss off a lot of people. But flip side, seeing Thane die would definitely have some power there, and I think would fit in with Pale going on his journey. And just maybe with some of the thing. See, again, I forget what is public and not. So just in terms of
I think everything
versions
about Thane is
well, that's not
like everything we know, I think, is known.
It wasn't so much that, it's just different versions of characters that we might have seen. But anyway, I just feel like it could create a lot of cool storytelling for Pale and his journey.
No, I agree. That's kind of what I was like. I think if you're gonna go with a young one, I think Atreyu could be massive again for Pale's story as well as for Hannibal.
That's what I was thinking. It would piss off a lot of people, right? If all of a sudden it's
but like, a lot of people are like,
he's so cool.
My favorite.
Oh my God.
Like,
I know, and it's like,
so pick a new favorite, I guess. I mean, that would, but you know, that's like killing Snake Eyes. A lot of people would be up in arms and they'd be like, I'm done with this line. They killed my favorite character. Yeah, I mean, like, speaking moistly, I'm still pissed that Optimus Prime died. It's been 30 years or something. 40 years? How long has it been? 40 years, I think, since Optimus Prime died or whatever. So,
well, it's a good thing that Michael Bay relaunched the franchise, so everything's fine now.
Yeah, everybody's back to life. And they're never, you're never really dead as long as somebody remembers you, right? So
no one ever really dies. NERD.
Racist Thane, RIP. He's ready to kill him off today. The Collecting Brothers, what's up, guys? It says killing younglings always hits harder. That's true. That's a good point. They had so much potential. They were too young to die. Star says perhaps there are more races on the way. I am sure that there will be more races on the way.
Pacadines.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I had a couple more starred. Let me pull up.
Ray's saying, "Oh hell no!" Better not be a
Speaking moistly, normal humans could be a big bad. I think you're right. I think we've discussed that a little bit too. Like, where would they come from? What would be like? Why would we not have seen them before? Like, is there another arc on the other side of the planet?
Or that never even made it to the planet. Maybe there was like, they were caravanning and they got lost on the I-5.
Could there be like, I think of like Dragon Ball, right? When the Saiyan's planet gets destroyed, but Vegeta's off world. So could there be humans that were sort of on a mission and they get back to the planet and they're like, what gives, man? There's nobody here. And they go looking. And then they're mad because they find monkeys and cats and they're Yeah, so I could see it. I could see it.
There goes the neighborhood.
Thanos. I do think the good guys are going to have some kind of lost shakeup to push them into the next phase. I could see that. I could see, and I mean, let's be honest. You know, Thane or Atreyu. You know, people react differently. Grief does funny things to people. I'm just saying it could shake things up in a big way. Star will be exploring different environment. Yeah, sorry, I tagged that before. I had it in my notes to talk about that. So, the animals for colder climates migrate north while the reptiles seek out the hotter humid. Yeah, I think we'll see that. I hope we see that, right? Like explanations of sort of why people are where they are. House Hendo, long term, I'd like to see this story being generational, as in years down the road, the torch is passed to descendants, etc. I think that would be cool. You could do that like we were talking about, like potential one shots. You could do that as a one shot sooner rather than later. I think
like a jump to the future.
Yeah. Or you could jump to the past too. Like I said, you could do Mika, like, you know, when they land. You could do a one shot of like day one. Like, oh, this is messed up. Like, I got in the ship as a human and I got out of the ship as a orangutan. What is going on here? And you got out as a tiger. So what's going on? Oh man, that would be a trip. That would be a great one shot though too. Jason, are you still watching? Take notes. Let's see. I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but still kind of keep the conversation going. And Nolan says, yeah, I hate to say it, but Hannibal or Thane's death could work.
Yep.
And Jason mentioned that Mother Mika did die. Yes. So there has been a death. So it's not, you know, off the books, right?
Oh man, sorry. And I just got this scene of like, you know, they've hinted at this rivalry between Thane and Hannibal. They've gone through this thing of like working together to save their kids.
Thane dies. See a buddy cop one shot.
Thane, well, yeah, we could, but then
Thane, I know where you were going, but my mind went a totally different direction.
Thane dies, and Hannibal steps up and makes a commitment to raise and take care of Pale. Oh, sorry. Anyways,
fan fiction. Let's see. Star says, I can't believe that with all those alpha males that everyone in a given tribe would go along with the leaders. Mala is the leader of Chunari. So
Jadu is arguably the leader of,
and I was gonna say, and Jadu I think is manipulating what's going on with Horde too. So I think there is more going on in terms of, you know, power structures there than just alpha males. Yeah, right fast. It better not be a trade. I think there's a lot of people that would probably have a very strong feeling if it was Atreyu. But maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe that just go big or go home, right? Just get rid of Atreyu and see where the cards fall.
Yeah, there's
and it's Game Quest. Very good point. Is it necessarily good storytelling? And that's what I'm saying. If it's good storytelling, then I'm all for it. If it's a shock, if it's to sell, you know, an issue of comic books or to like get people to go to a movie theater, I don't like that.
And to be clear, when I said it would piss people off, I was saying that the effect that would happen, not necessarily it should be done to piss people off. But I just, I don't think there's not much to buy there for the shock.
Yeah, and I mean, I just think that like if you do it for shock, and I think it's Game Quest makes this point too. After 40 years of comic reading, rarely are deaths impactful and well done, because they almost always come back. Yeah. That's the joke, right? You're never really dead in a comic book because they can just sort of jump around chronologically and bring you back, or just have some weird thing. So that you know, my point of, if you do kill somebody off that doesn't have precedence that they can be brought back, you can't bring them back. And if you do, then I will be upset, Jason. That will be the thing that makes me angry. I don't think, you know, writing a story that involves, you know, a character's death is bad. I think bringing them back is worse. with some exceptions. I think Death of Superman might be the one that I can think of that actually made sense and it was done pretty well.
That he
I think
died or that he came back or all of the above?
all of it. I mean,
Gotcha.
like the build up to his death and the way they handled his death, I think was really, really good. The rise of the Superman was great. And then to have him come back kind of a little bit different, a little bit changed was good. Like, I don't remember there being, there probably was because I was young and I didn't, you know, there probably was pushback, but not for me. I love Superboy. And Raypaz, I'm here steady talking shit, talking to the Collecting Brothers. Hey, we're happy to have you. We're happy to have everybody. It's good. It's good to be hanging out with everybody. It's fun to chat about this stuff. Like, this is, like, full disclosure, this was, you know, when Brick and I started talking about AWOK, and we were like, we're gonna do this on YouTube so that we can have more people talk about it with us. Yeah. That's really the whole point. So,
and if we weren't doing this on YouTube, we'd be doing it anyway. Just,
yeah, that's what I mean. We'd be chatting back and forth about all these same things, but wouldn't have as many good ideas as you guys do. So, Ray says, "I vote for Thane." We'll do a poll. We'll do like they did with DC. We'll have a
oh yeah,
like you can vote whether a character dies or not, or maybe you can vote on
976.
Yeah.
THNE for Thane. Yeah.
Ray says zombie Thane figure. Yeah, that's how you bring them back, right? They're just not quite dead. They're dead, but they're not quite dead.
No, dude. Oh no. Oh, sorry. Because of the cloning thing. Oh, they clone him and they make a clone to mess with Pale.
Oh, that's
anyway, sorry. I actually don't want to see that. I'm not a big fan of a lot of clone storytelling, people dying or whatever. But if
I don't like that either, and I don't want to see it. But I like the idea of that. Like, I like the
psychologically.
But that's where I said, like, we don't have precedence for Thane coming back, right? We don't have precedence for Thane having a clone body. So they would have to somehow have his consciousness.
Sure.
Where, like, Kali's consciousness seems to have. If you're reading X-Men, they have this thing where basically they have a backup. So I think it's every 48 hours or something. Every human's or every mutant's like soul is downloaded to this hard drive, so that when they die, they can just bring them back to life. But there's lag sometimes. So how you died, you usually forget how you died, which is it's a kind of a crazy concept. They're moving away from it, but I thought it was a good idea. But there would have to be precedence for, like, how Thane could be put into a body. But could you create a clone that looked like Thane that wasn't Thane? You could, but hopefully they won't do that, because there's tons of people that are still alive. That's why I don't like when people come back. It's like, you just find a new character, find a new Thane, you know, like find a father figure that Pale can kind of meet up with, right? Or you know, Hannibal could sort of take over, whatever. Like, you don't need, if you kill him off, you don't need him to come back. Let's see.
Could there be an Easter egg in the comic moving forward where we find out that Hannibal has 4 friends? Murdoch, BA, Face.
I would love that. Jason says, y'all got all kinds of great possibilities. I'm glad I already have all this planned out. And I do know that he has multiple story arcs planned. So it's not as though what we're saying is going to influence anything at all. Which is the way I want it anyway, because it's the idea, like we were talking about, the idea of, like, well, that's not how it should go. It's like, well, it's going to go how Jason wants it to go. So if you don't like it,
suck it.
Find another comic book.
It being a lemon. Sorry, go
ahead. Let's see. House Hendo says Atreyu equals Daryl Dixon.
Daryl? Is that from
House of the Walking Dead? Just Walking Dead.
Got it.
Let's see. Collecting Brothers says, Adam spitting facts. I don't know what that's in reference to, but that is correct.
Just in general, he just spits
facts.
Like facts go flying out of his mouth.
None of this is my opinion. This is all based on facts.
If you're not careful, it might get in your eye. You might get infected with facts. It's just the way it is.
Star says, I think deaths would be needed in order to go generational unless these guys are living hundreds of years. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You're not going to have these characters all live forever. And that's kind of how I look at it. Like, if you kill them off, they're done. But you know, you can introduce another character. You don't need to bring the ones back. So
back to your one shots. A one shot from before they got onto an arc.
Oh, like from the human planet.
To be a prelude to maybe some more exploration of human stuff, maybe in a future arc.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. You could, I mean, you could use one shots to like plant seeds, to not so much retcon, but sort of like, you know, preview.
You imagine someone jumps in on that one and they're like, I thought this was the animal book.
Yeah, I just got into this Animal Warriors of the Kingdom book, but it was all about humans in a spaceship. I don't understand what's going on here. There's no kingdom. There's no animals. They're not even warriors. They're just astronauts. Yeah. Well, you could do what ifs though too, right? You could do like a AWOK what if. So you could do like, what if Thane was brought back as a clone? And then it wouldn't have to like retcon things, right? Like that's the way around.
That's the beauty of what if, right?
It's like, that's the beauty of what if. DC did Elseworlds too, and I used to love that. Like, what if Batman was Tarzan? I remember that one. I was like, this is dope. He's just like beating people up with rocks and sticks.
I'm one of those DC fans who actually enjoyed the Elseworlds stuff a lot more than the actual stuff.
Yep. Speaking of voice, people are just going back and forth about who they're okay with being killed off.
Yeah, totally. We opened up that.
Derek says, I told you it's gonna be Hannibal. So it's, everybody's got their thing, right? Like everybody's got their character that they're like, I'm okay with that one being gone. But everybody's got their character that's like, if he kills off this guy or girl, I'm gonna write a very angry comment on a Facebook post. Collecting Brothers, Hickman's generational chambers with Professor X was interesting. Yes, I thought it was really fun. I get why a lot of people didn't like it. From the man himself, deaths in the story is a big deal, and this is essentially a cartoon in comic form, so it will be maybe 1 or 2 per season. If anyone dies, the chance of them coming back is very, very slim.
Good.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the way it should be. Let's see. We're gonna wrap it up because we're getting a little long here.
Actually. Yep.
And I'm lost in the chat again. So let me see if I can catch up to the end of the chat, and I don't think there's this is where it digresses into everybody starts to sort of throw their thing in, and then it's just impossible to keep up. That new one you got, it's just a ripoff of Lexion.
Oh, this one? No, totally.
Yeah, that was clearly just a ripoff of Lexion, right?
Yeah, they totally just saw that Lexion. They're like, let me make a dude, furry dude, pointy ears.
Mr. Wonderful says, I'm gonna read my AWOK again tonight. Yeah, it's great. I find it's a lot of fun to go back, you know, after we have these chats and after we sort of get further and further into the story, like to go back to issue 1 and be like, oh, that makes so much more sense now, and it was right there in front of our faces the whole time, kind of thing. So anyways, Brick, what do you got going on? What's coming up? Where can people find you? The links are in the description, but
sure. In about 45 minutes over on the Brick Something channel, I will be with Yoko McCann of Living La Vida Yoko, The Fallen Fat Chronicles, and Boba Squadron, doing the news, talking about the needless BS we saw this week, and shorts throughout the week. I'm still trying to get through and figure out where I'm at with the channel in 2024, honestly. So yeah, hopefully we'll be getting some AWOK talk stuff soon, doing some recording for some of the talking a little bit more about the lore. I love toys, so I want to see more of these things, get some proper videos. The shorts are great on the channel, but I need to get to those. And then on Monday, tomorrow, we'll be doing part 2 of talking about the second half of the first installment of Motu Revelation over on the Geek DF Out channel. That's tomorrow night at 7 p.m., I believe. And I'm hoping to join them because this Wednesday or Thursday, the new Motu Revolution comes out. I'm excited. Yeah, and then we're going to sort of start breaking those down, I think, starting Friday. I'm not sure if I'm on those, but if not, I'll just be talking to myself about Motu Revolution, and it's going to be awesome.
7 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, yeah.
Just to be clear.
The guy on the East Coast, 7 p.m. Pacific. Correct.
And Raypaz says the channel Sunday Live is fire. It is. If you haven't checked out Brick Something's news, definitely do that. You've got just enough time to get a snack and have a bathroom break and get back on the YouTubes to get comfortable, to get your chat on. But yeah, definitely tune in for that.
Real quick, what about you? What are you unboxing this week? Because you've been doing those really regularly. What are
so I'm gonna do. I went back and forth for Wednesday. I went back and forth because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do just a normal like recorded, but I'm gonna do. I'm gonna unbox the G.I. Joe Classified Helix live on Wednesday night. Normally I do kind of like older stuff that I'm just getting around to, but I'm gonna open that one because I think that's a fun one, and I think there's potentially a lot of discussion around that one. But I've got some other G.I. Joes to unbox. Those videos should go up sometime in the week. Those I just put up, and whatever happens with them happens. I got a couple Mythic Legions figure obscuras that I need to open as well. It's just finding the time to like sit down and set up and record them and then edit them and then on and on and on. Yeah, we're just having fun. And we will continue to do that going forward. Best thing to do, both here and over on Brick Something's channel, is just subscribe and hit that notification bell, and then you won't miss anything. You'll be laughing because you won't need the updates. The updates will come to you. My big thing that I need to get better at is posting things earlier, not like day of, so that people know what's coming up on the channel. So that's my current task, is just try to figure that out a little bit better. But anyways, it's been a blast. It's been fun. I can't remember what this one does. Confetti. Thank you guys for joining us. If you were in the chat, I appreciate you. If you're watching the replay, I appreciate you just the same. I understand that people can't always get here, but the chat is always fun. If you guys want to chat with Brick or I'm speaking for Brick. If you want to speak about AWOK with Brick or I, message us, comment on our videos, whatever. We're happy to talk about this stuff outside of this little box, right? So hit us up. We're happy to chat. Until next time, bye. Does one do anything? I guess not.
I think the middle finger does a thing where